Hello, my name's Kelly Lane, and I have the situational approach for my presentation. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to go over the history, key terms, what situational approach is, dimensions of situational approach, how to apply it, the strengths, critiques, some examples, and how it applies to nutrition and the usefulness of it for future work. So in 1969, the situational approach first appeared in Blanchard and Hershey's classic book, Management of Organizational Behavior. Blanchard and Hershey based this off of Bill Redden's 1967 3D management style theory. The theory was first called the life cycle theory of leadership, but during the mid-1970s, it was renamed the situational leadership theory. There have been revisions and advancements since then by Blanchard and Hershey in 1977, 1985, and 1988, and then again by Blanchard, Dre, Zingamari, and Nelson in 1993 and 2013. These refinements and extensions of the original model are now known as Situational Leadership 2. This is now one of the most well-known popular leadership models used today. So some key terms that I'm going to be going over are leadership style, developmental level of followers, directive behaviors, supportive behaviors, competence, and commitment. These are important to understand when discussing the situational approach, and to have a better understanding of them, I will define them throughout the presentation. So what is situational approach? It focuses on leadership situations and demands that leaders match their style to the compatibilities and commitment of the groups or followers. It adapts to the existing work environment and the needs of the organization. It is not based on a specific skill of a leader. Instead, the style of management suits the requirements of the organization. Situational approach stresses that there is both a directive and a supportive dimension, and that each has to be applied in any given situation. So there are two dimensions of situational approach. One is leadership style, which is a leader's method of providing direction, implementing plans, and motivating people, while developmental level of followers is defined as the degree to which followers have the competence and commitment necessary to accomplish a given goal or activity. To go into more detail, research shows that there is no all-purpose leadership style. Successful leaders are those who can adapt their behavior to meet the needs of a situation. Leadership style includes both directive behaviors and supportive behaviors. So directive behaviors help group members accomplish goals by establishing goals and methods of evaluation, setting timelines, defining roles, giving directions, and showing how goals should be achieved. They often coincide with one-way communication, how it is to be done, what is to be done, and who is responsible for doing it. On the other hand, supportive behaviors help group members feel comfortable about themselves, their coworkers, and the situation. They usually involve two-way communication and responses that show social and emotional support to others. So some of the examples of this could be asking for input, solving problems, and listening. Directive behaviors and supportive behaviors can also further be classified into four distinctive categories. So situational leadership is based on the amount of direction a leader gives which is also known as task behavior. Also, relationship behavior, or the amount of socio-emotional support a leader provides. And lastly, the readiness level that followers exhibit on a specific task, function, or activity that the leader is attempting to accomplish through the individual or group. So if you look at the diagram on the left, this shows a bell-shaped curve and the 4 styles of situational leadership. The bottom right box, or the one labeled S1, represents high task, low relationship leader behavior, which is characterized as telling because this style is identified by one-way communication in which the leader defines the role of followers and tells them what, how, when, and where to do various tasks. So now onto the top right box, or S2, represents the high task, high relationship leader behavior, which is also known as selling, because with this style, most of the direction is still provided by the leader, and the leader uses two-way communication and socio-emotional support to get the followers psychologically to buy into decisions to have them be made. So the top left box represents high relationship, low task leader behavior, which is also known as participating, because with this style, the leader and followers share is decision making through two-way communication and much facilitating behavior from the leader, since followers have the ability and knowledge to do the task. Lastly is the low relationship, low task leader behavior. It's also labeled as delegating because the style involves letting followers run their own show, per se. The leader delegating, since the followers are high in readiness, have the ability, and are both willing and able to take responsibility for directing their own behavior. So this shows how directive and supportive leadership behaviors can be combined for each of the 4 different leadership styles. The arrows at the bottom and the left side show that directive behaviors are high in S1 and S2 and low in S3 and S4, whereas supportive behaviors are high in S2 and S3 and low in S1 and S2. The second dimension of this approach is developmental level followers. This is the degree which followers have the competence and commitment necessary to accomplish a given goal or activity. So going off of this, there are 2 aspects of this level that leaders should develop for their followers to be self-motivated rather than dependent. And these include competence and commitment. So competence is the knowledge and skills a follower brings to a specific goal or task, and commitment is the follower's motivation and confidence on that goal or task. So these 2 dimensions can also be divided into 4 developmental levels of the followers. So as you can see on the far left, on the figure D4 shows high competence, high commitment. This is when the follower has the competence and confidence to perform. They are high in knowledge as well as the ability to work unsupervised. Next is moderate competence and variable commitment. This is when followers have the ability but are not confident to utilize it. And these followers often know what to do but are doubting themselves, which makes them insecure to perform. D2 shows some competence and low commitment. This is when the followers has some ability but is not motivated to accomplish tasks. The follower has little experience on the task, but due to the expectation, they lose motivation to work on it. And lastly is low confidence and high commitment, which is when the follower lacks the ability but is motivated. So how do you apply situational approach? There are three main steps. The first step is to identify the specific goal, such as using a framework like a SMART goal. Step two is the diagnosis, the individual level of competence and commitment. And step three is to apply the correct leadership style. So now I'm going to go over the strengths of the approach. One strength of the model is its effectiveness on training leaders within an organization due to its flexibility. Going off of this, the flexibility will also help a leader understand the leadership style that should be applied to their followers at various levels. For example, if his or her leadership style is either overleading or underleading to their followers while trying to accomplish a certain goal or task. So this approach is easy to understand and can be applied to a variety of settings. Instead of being complex, it is very straightforward and can be easily grasped and can be used in a work, school, or even family setting. Lastly, not everyone is the same and may have different needs while accomplishing a goal, and this model kind of reminds us of that, to treat everyone differently and to look for opportunities to help them learn new skills and become more confident. So there have been a few critiques on the situational approach. First, there has been little research done to justify it, and if they have been done, most of them have not been published. There are also been a lot of controversy between these advocating models and those advocating one best style models, such as high, high versus low, low, which are shown in the situational model diagram. For example, the author does not make it clear on how commitment and competence combine to form 4 levels of development. A third criticism of the approach is the success of the model through testing. A study was done by Fernandez Vicinio that shows that newly hired individuals were most satisfied and performed better under highly structured leadership styles, but the performance of more experienced and mature teachers were unrelated to the style. Gear Thompson and Vicino again conducted a study in 2009 that found no clear support of the model. Lastly, situational leadership does not account for demographic characteristics such as education, experience, age, or even gender. So one example that shows the use of situational approach was a study published in the Bulletin of Education and Research called The Impact of Leadership Style of Teacher on the Performance of Students, and application of Hersey and Blanchard's situational model. So the purpose of this study was to explore the impact of leadership styles of teachers and on the performance of students with the use of the model. So 150 8th grade students at an urban school for girls participated. 80 students were selected systematically and then divided into 2 equal groups, which made it 40 each. One group was labeled a control group, and the other was the experimental group. So in the first part of the study, a questionnaire asked general and environmental preferences in order to measure the readiness level of the students belonging to the experimental group. So based off of these results, 40 students from the experimental group were divided into 4 different categories of readiness according to the following criteria, which you can see on the bottom right of the slide. From these results, there were 4 categories, and if up to 25% of the answers were positive, then they were categorized as unable and unwilling, which was R1. R2 was categorized as unable but willing, which was 26% to 50% positive responses. R3 is able but willing to choose unwilling by 51 to 71% positive responses. And then lastly, R4 is able and willing, which was above 75% positive responses. So in the second part of the study, a pretest was given to both the experimental and control groups in order to calculate achievement scores. The chapters 5, 6, and 7 of General Science Book 8, which was a textbook, was selected for the syllabus for the teaching protocols for the experimental group. And at the end, a post-test was conducted for both the groups and achievement scores were calculated. So the results showed that the participants' strength and readiness level / treatment categories was 13.8% delegating, 18.8% participating, 10% selling, and 7.5% telling. There was no significant difference found between the achievement scores of the control and the experimental group, but there is a significant difference in mean scores of the control group and the experimental group. Secondly, the pretest and post-test performances of the control group is almost the same, but there is a difference in the performance of the experimental group due to the intervention that was using the techniques given by Hersey and Blanchard in the model. So this shows that the application of the model has established a significant impact on the performance of students from the role that the teachers play as the leader, and it can improve the performance of the students with the use of the model. The second example of this approach is a study done by air traffic control workers. The purpose of this study was to investigate how leadership styles, leadership adaptability, and over and under task leadership behavior differed across various air traffic control settings. So 309 employees from 3 different air traffic control centers in Sweden with different operational conditions and leadership structures, administrative air traffic management unit, they participated. Leadership was measured with a questionnaire, and the questionnaire consisted of 32 items that reflected different situations. So for each study location and for each type of situation, the leadership style profiles were calculated by a mean score for each of the 4 possible leadership styles, which was S1 through S4. Leadership data was also calculated as a mean score with respect to the leadership style adaptability for each situation and study location. So for each study location and situation, the questionnaire data was further calculated as a mean score, which concerned the over and under task behavior. So the over and under task behavior scales range from 0, which is no over, no under task behavior, or 24, which is a maximum over and under task behavior. Each item also focused on leadership in goal or individual situations or success or hardship situations. So the results show that for success in group situations, the overall most used leadership style was S3, which is high relationship, low task behavior, and the second most was S2, which is high task, high relationship behavior. In hardship and individual situations, the most frequent leadership style used was S2, and secondly was S3. So this shows that the frequency of over and under task behavior was based off of the situation. This means that the comparison between success and hardship situations and over task or under task behavior turned out to be statistically significant. And the same goes for individual and group situations, but the comparison between individual and group situations and overtask behavior was significantly different, where the individual and group situations concerning undertask behavior were not significant. So the results from this study describe the situational leadership as parallel over the 3 study locations, despite the differences in leadership conditions. So this shows that characteristics of air traffic control had a greater impact on the leadership performance than location. So an article from the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics called Learning to Lead, Developing Dietetic Leaders shares that being a leader is about engaging people and motivating them to work toward a common goal. And leaders can only lead when followers are willing to follow. And in this sense, leaders must provide something in return for their position. I think this correlates with how the situational approach applies to nutrition and future work. As mentioned before, this approach focuses on leadership situations and demands that leaders match their style to the capabilities and commitment of the groups or followers. There are various ways that this can be applied to nutrition. As an RD, you work with other professionals that have a common goal. Whether it's in clinical, community, or a food service setting, RDs can have a leadership and follower position. With the use of situational approach, RDs can establish a relationship with his or her team members in order to understand their state of mind to successfully accomplish a common goal. More specifically, this approach is useful to nutrition in future workplaces because it creates more flexibility in the workplace, encourages successful collaboration among team members, and boosts employees' motivation. Flexibility is key because as a leader in this profession, you can use different leadership approaches in order to have an impact on the other group members, employees, and even patients. By encouraging successful collaboration among team members as an RD, it will create valuable innovations that are key for this position. Lastly, boosting motivation also applies to nutrition and future work because in this position you delegate tasks, have to trust other team members, and provide support throughout in order to reach a common goal. Here are my references. Thank you for listening.